We are just past the halfway point of the NFL season, so I wanted to do a playoff predictions video. Now, some teams that had high hopes this year have been horrible. Looking at you, Jets. And some teams have been surprisingly good through 9 weeks, so let's go through which teams I think will make the cut in January. Let's start with the AFC. Number 1 seed, I got the Chiefs, 2 Bills, 3 Steelers, 4 Texans, 5 Ravens, 6 Chargers, and 7 Bengals. NFC, I got number 1 Lions, 2 seed Commanders, 3 Falcons, 4 49ers, 5 Eagles, 6 Packers, and 7 Vikings. Now, let's go down and break down all the games. So, starting out with the wild card round, we got the Bengals at the Bills. So the Bengals head into Buffalo to take on the Bills in a game that has been quite the rivalry the last handful of years. The Bengals are 3-0 all-time against the Bills in the playoffs, and their most recent win coming in January of 2023 in the divisional round. The Bills and their fans are no stranger to heartbreak, but I think this is the game where the Bills prove they can beat Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I have the Bills winning. Next, we got the Chargers at the Steelers. Now, the Chargers are an interesting team. They have a QB with all of the talent and arm strength, but bad coaching has really handcuffed them. Fortunately for the Chargers, they finally have a great coach in Jim Harbaugh, who I think will turn this franchise around. It is the first year, though, and I think the Chargers need more time. Also, getting Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in the offseason for essentially nothing has been a great addition for them. Being played in Pittsburgh and the Steelers just being a better team, I have them getting the win. Next, we got Ravens at Texans. Rematch of what would be last year's divisional matchup, but this year it would take place in Houston. Now, I like Houston, and I think they have a lot of young talent, but they just lost Stephon Diggs for the season, and Nico Collins still hasn't come back from his injury. But Joe Mixon has been a big part of their offense this year, but unfortunately the Ravens are too good of a team, and with an MVP quarterback, Derrick Henry, who is showing no signs of slowing down, I have the Ravens winning in Houston. Vikings at Commanders. Now, I really hope this game happens because I think this would be a fun game to watch. You got a tale of two teams who were not really expected to compete this year. Vikings started 5-0 after a lot of people projected them to win like 6 or 7 games all year. Plus, Brian Flores' defense has been a nightmare for opposing teams. On the other hand, Commanders, with a new owner and a new first-round quarterback, were looking to rebuild. But what sucks for the rest of the NFC East is that they seem to have pulled the Houston Texans and went from picking second in the draft to being a playoff contender. Jaden Daniels has been great through 9 weeks, and I really hope he wins Offensive Rookie of the Year. Now, being a Vikings fan, I am far too familiar with heartbreak, so I have the Commanders getting the win. Packers at Falcons. These two teams have met 4 times in the postseason and are split 2-2. The Falcons landed Kirk Cousins this offseason in hopes that he could make them Super Bowl contenders. So far, the Falcons have been good, and Kirk Cousins has shown that he can lead a last-minute comeback, which is something that feels weird to say. Packers have been a good team this year, and were my pick to win the Super Bowl back in June. Am I biased? Yeah, but I think when this team is fully healthy and not shooting themselves in the foot with penalties and sloppy gameplay, that they can beat anyone in the league. Now, being played indoors with this high-powered offense, I have the Packers repeating what they did in Dallas last year and winning by a couple touchdowns. I like Kirk Cousins, but he's just shown time and time again that he can't win big games. In the last wild card game, we got the Eagles at the 49ers. Now, both of these teams have struggled this year, and I think Nick Sirianni is still on the hot seat and probably not super popular in Philadelphia, even though the Eagles have won the last couple weeks. And I think the Eagles can be a very dangerous team, especially this year since they added Saquon Barkley. But I just don't trust him this year to go far. And the 49ers have been the definition of banged up. After all the offseason trade rumors and contract discussions with Brandon Ayuk, he tore his ACL and is now out for the year. George Kittle has been banged up, Deebo Samuel has had pneumonia, and Christian McCaffrey still hasn't played yet this year. So I do think the 49ers will get back on track and be a hard team to beat in the playoffs. And with this game being played in San Francisco, and with the 49ers just having a better coaching staff, I have the 49ers winning. So, moving on to the divisional round, we got the Ravens at the Chiefs, and yet another rematch of one of last year's playoff games. So, the Ravens travel to Kansas City to take on the number 1 seeded Chiefs. Now, there was a lot of criticism hailed at the Ravens last year after that AFC Championship game. Why didn't they run the ball more? The coaching staff dropped the ball. Now, this year, with the Ravens having one of the best running backs of all time, you would hope that in a cold weather game, the Ravens will establish the run better with Derrick Henry. And although I think the Ravens have a better roster this year than they did last year, their defense has struggled. Plus, it's hard for me to bet against the Chiefs at home with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes leading the charge. Chiefs want to be the first ever three-peat Super Bowl champion, and I just think the Ravens will fall short again. I have the Chiefs winning a low-scoring game in Arrowhead. Next up, we got the Steelers at the Bills. Now, what will be a divisional game in a divisional round, this game will show if the Steelers can break their postseason struggles and make a deep playoff run. And with it being in Buffalo and the Bills having a better quarterback, I think the Bills advance to the AFC Championship game. Bills win. Moving to the NFC, we got the Packers at the Lions. Another rivalry game that has the potential to be one of the best playoff games in the last decade. We could see a situation where the Lions sweep the Packers during the regular season, and then the Packers go into Detroit as big underdogs. Now, the Lions, I think, are the best team in the NFC right now, and I would argue the entire league. Dan Campbell has done a remarkable job as the head coach and completely turned that franchise around. You can tell his players love him, and he's completely loved by the city of Detroit. My only criticism with Dan Campbell is that his aggression sometimes can get him into trouble, and that's arguably what his biggest strength is. It's no secret that he loves to go for it on fourth down, and he has had a ton of success with it. However, this trade is what cost him in the NFC Championship game last year. Had Detroit kicked a field goal late in the fourth quarter, who knows? That may have been enough to send him to the Super Bowl. Now the Packers are a young team with a lot of weapons, and I have them going into Detroit and getting the upset. And finally, we got the 49ers at the Commanders. Now, I can boil this game down into one word: experience. I like the Commanders, and I think they have a bright future, but I just believe San Francisco will be too much for Washington to deal with. 49ers get the win on the road. Which takes us to the AFC Championship game, where you have the Bills heading to Kansas City. Now, Chiefs have kind of owned the Bills in the playoffs the last few years. Josh Allen is 0-3 against Patrick Mahomes in the postseason, and I know a lot of Bills fans were optimistic last year that with the playoff game being in Buffalo, they could finally get over the hump and beat the Chiefs. What sucks is that they had to watch their team lose at home to a team who had never played a road playoff game before. This will be the Chiefs' 7th straight AFC Championship game, with it being the 6th at Arrowhead in the Patrick Mahomes era, and I just don't see the Bills winning in Kansas City. Chiefs have shown time and time again that they always find ways to win. And finally, we got the NFC Championship game, where I have the Packers heading to San Francisco. And oh boy, as a Packers fan, this matchup both terrifies me and excites me. Throughout my teenage years and early adulthood, the 49ers have been the Packers' kryptonite. Aaron Rodgers was 0-4 against San Francisco in the postseason, and last year I was very hopeful that Jordan Love would change the narrative. Now, the Packers had chances to win that game. They had bad red zone offense, a missed field goal, and a couple of Jordan Love interceptions is what killed the Packers. So, if there's ever a year where the Packers can get past the 49ers, I think it's this year. And I think they go into San Francisco and get the win, finally giving this team, coaches, and Packers fans a sigh of relief. Which means in the Super Bowl, I have what will be a rematch of Super Bowl I between the Chiefs and the Packers. It'll be Jordan Love versus Patrick Mahomes in New Orleans for Super Bowl 59. And I think this will be a fun game. And again, I picked the Packers to win the Super Bowl back in June, so I have them spoiling the Chiefs' three-peat. Jordan Love gets his first Super Bowl and joins Tom Brady as the only two quarterbacks to beat Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl.